This is an oral history interview with Irene Goshert, age 81, and Harold Goshert, age 86, given by Brett Goshert and Kathy Pershing on April 6th and April 19th, 1986.
Okay, and this is not going to be like an interview kind of thing.
No, don't matter.
It's just going to be kind of a, I ask you a couple questions.
Whatever you want to do, I'm here.
Okay, well, I'm supposed to start with your family history, starting from your grandparents. Did your grandparents live in India too?
Yes, they lived in Terricopi, Indiana, which is just a little west of South Bend.
So how long have the Gosherts, or the
Moleskis.
Molesky, that's right, Molesky.
That's my mother. And my mother's name was Molesky.
Molesky?
And Chmielewski. And my dad's name is Turczynski.
Turczynski, that was your maiden name?
That's my maiden name.
But your mother's maiden name was Molesky?
Yes. And a lot of them say Shimoleski, but it's really...
That's really a strange spelling.
Yes, it is. Well, it's Shimoleski. A lot of them pronounce it. But they both came from Germany. Germany owned Poland years. Well, it was once they'd owned it, then to go back this way and that way. And my mother's name, the parents, were really Hoppe, H-O-P-P-E. My dad's great-great-great-grandparents were really Turek, T-U-R-A-K. But as they told us, at one time, Poland got the country back, and they said anybody that had a Polish name could have ground. So that's the way they chose the name. However, my mom was born January 11th, 1879, and my dad was born March 4th, 1874. Is it on?
Yes.
Oh. And my mom's name was Mary Ann Molesky. And she and my dad were married November 9th, but I don't know the day.
Yeah.
My mom, yes, when there were 13 in the family, but 2 died when they were babies, and so there were 3 boys, and the rest of them were girls. And when they were 12 years old, Grandpa would take them to town and take them to some rich family that wanted to train the girls to be their housekeepers. And my mom was taken to Mrs. Livingston. They owned a very high-fashioned men's shop for years. And this is a funny thing my mother would tell. She couldn't speak English, and the lady was wonderful to her, but she said, "Mary, go down the basement and get something," and she showed her big round with a handle on it. So my mother went down, and the woman was busy in the kitchen, and she heard my mother coming up the stairs trying to get up there, and she looked, and instead of a pitcher that she wanted, my mother was bringing up a huge pumpkin. And of course it had the...
What did she speak? What language?
My mother? Polish.
Oh. I just wanted to...
Yeah, Polish.
And then, when you were growing up, did she speak English?
Oh, yes. You'd never know that my mother... I mean, there was no flaw or anything. She was very... In fact, she watched us. If we'd say, "Mom, I am Clara," she'd say, Now how? Clara and I. And she just couldn't stand those little things. She would correct us completely. No, she learned, and my dad only went to school long enough. Now, there were 9 in his family, and he was the oldest of the 9. And he went to school just long enough to learn to write his name. I think he said 3 or 4 months. But when we went to school, and I have this, they called it primary book, I was, I think, in the 3rd grade, and he would take the book and read the stories. I have it in the cedar chest, and every time he would read, he'd put a dot, and some of them had 6, 7 dots where he would read and reread them, and if he came to a word, he was very embarrassed. Then he'd say, now you read this line. And I would read it with the word that he didn't know. He said, that's right. And then he knew how. And he was a self-educated man, and he was a very brilliant man. And, yes.
Those were primers.
Primers, that's right. Primers, yeah. I still have it in my cedar chest. I treasure it. Yes, I treasure it very much.
And let's see, when was, I don't know how old Aunt Clara is or how old you are exactly. So
Clara was 84, January 5th of 1986. And I was 81, December 21st in 1985. So she is not quite 3 years older than I.
And what year was she born?
1902. And I was 1904, but you see, my birthday is at the very end of 1904, so you see that's the difference.
Okay. Let's see. And then Aunt Clara got married when she was how old?
19.
And they tell us about where they moved and everything?
Well, they, later on, my dad owned 3 homes, one on a corner and then one on each side, and they bought the home on one of the sides of my dad, and that's where they lived till both boys were born. Not, of course, at the hospital, but at this residence on Linden Avenue. And, of course, my father died there, but then they moved to the home on Marine, and that's where my mother went with them because of the fact that we had Grandpa and Grandma Goshert with us, so we had the room for my mother.
Were you born at the hospital or were you born at home?
Oh, no, at that time, no. I was born in Mill Creek, Indiana, in the country home. But when I was 4 weeks old, they were afraid that I wouldn't make it. So they moved to town. But my sister was born in town, and of course at home, because everybody just...
When you had your babies, were they born at home or in the hospital?
No, they were born at St. Joe Hospital. Jack was born at No, I don't remember the name of it, but he was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And Jim and Bill, and of course his sponsor was my dad and Mary Weck. I don't know, she moved to Minneapolis and we've never baptism, just not sponsors. Now Jim and Bill had Clara and Harold, their aunt and uncle. They both had the same sponsor.
Aunt Clara's husband was named
Harold. Harold Welcome Hensel. And my husband's name is Harold Jennings Goshert.
Those are nice names.
Yes. Honey, don't you want to come and tell when you were born and all that? No, you come on. They want to hear your voice. Come on, honey, and tell them.
What kind of, what nationality was your family, your side?
Pure-blooded English. My mother was.
Her name was?
Minnie Myrtle Crab. Pure-blood English, and my dad's side was German and French.
Pennsylvania Dutch.
Well, he always called them Pennsylvania. Good Lord,
Yeah.
his ancestors came over here. 3 brothers came over and settled in Pennsylvania. And they always called themselves Pennsylvania Dutch.
But really, the name is French, and instead of Goshert, it can be,
It was Gatchet or something. G-A.
well, yes.
Crochet?
No, it can be Gosher, just like Colbert, Gosher, see.
But actually, on my dad's side, they were German. On my grandmother's side, there was French. Great-grandmother. Great-grandmother.
Tell about the 3 brothers.
Huh?
Tell about the 3 brothers that came.
Well, I just said 3 brothers came over, crossed the pond, and they all settled in Pennsylvania.
Then,
And that was my great-grandfather and 2 of his brothers came over. And then they all claimed they were Pennsylvania Dutch.
yeah, but what I mean, when they came, didn't 2 of them settle in Ohio and 1 in Indiana? Was
Well,
that-
they split up,
Yeah,
but they first landed in Pennsylvania. That's how they
I
got.
know,
That's
but
how
I
they
mean-
come up to.
I mean when they came to Indiana.
Then they split up. One went to Ohio, and the other one in Indiana. And now we got Gosherts all over the nation. And there's one out in Los Angeles I talked to.
Well, there's one here we noticed too in the
Is that a relative of ours?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
I noticed that.
Because he was the only boy, and then the others, and your father was the only child.
No, he's the only son.
The only
He had
son.
two
yeah,
half-sisters.
yeah. But he was the only son. So, whatever the other Gosherts are, they're from the other...
The other tribe.
Yeah.
One of 2 brothers.
So, that's about covers it, doesn't it?
So, well, how many people did you have in your family?
Mine?
Yeah,
Me?
yeah.
That's all.
Just 10?
You're an only child?
Yeah.
Can't you tell?
Yeah.
Well, Brett,
I got all the loving and all the hell. It, I shouldn't say this, but it kind of hit me pretty hard in the Depression. The banks failed and so forth. It took my dad down the river. And I was the only son that took us up to Mama and I. He lived with us for 10 years.
he was 83 when he came, and he was 92
Two when he died.
when he died. And Brett, we
Of course, Mom only lived with us about 6 months.
we got them in September,
September, yeah,
and she
Labor
died in March.
And that,
Yeah.
you told us about her, taking care of her.
Oh yes, she was a doll. And
Oh,
she died of
It was all up to me.
enlarged heart.
It's all up to her mama was very good about it. She took him in and, well, that's right. That's right.
Well,
You got to take care of your family.
what'd you say,
Pardon?
honey?
You always need to take care of your family.
Absolutely.
That's what you have
what
to
we
fall
were
back
doing.
on.
Yeah.
You 2 meetings, because that got to raise.
Oh, well,
Okay, this is Sharon.
no, he'll just get a chair. My husband was rooming at my sister's home, and after a year's time, my boyfriend, if I dare say, was out of town. He was a musician, and I was at home. We had company, and my brother-in-law came over and said, we want to go down to the lake. They didn't have a car. And he said, Goshert said he'd like to drive down to Hudson Lake too. But, oh God, don't please. But he said, ask Irene to go too. So I went that night with them.
Well, the thing of it is, let me tell that story.
Did you like her?
If I'd been down home, and I come home on a beautiful day, it was just in the late spring, Oh, about June. Yeah, about June. So, Harold, Claire and Harold, I was rooming with them, and I was sitting there reading the Sunday paper, and I says to him, how would you like to go out to Huffman Lake tonight? Hudson. Yeah, Hudson Lake. And, they'd be tickled to go, they'd like to go. I looked out, and Mama was out there with 2 or 3, 4 little girls playing around. And I knew her boyfriend was over in Ohio. And I said, well, tell Irene if she'd like to go, nothing to do, she's welcome to go along. So that's how we started.
Did you like her before that, or
Huh?
He thought I was a numbskull.
Well, no, she'd be sitting there, and I'd come in, and she'd be sitting there in the living room with her boyfriend, and she wouldn't even look at me, and I'd come in, so go upstairs and so forth. New Year's Eve, I come in. She was so enthralled with the boyfriend she had, she never even said hello to me on New Year's Eve.
Well, we were doing the Charleston, and after you do the Charleston, you don't look at anybody.
So she went along with me that night, and then while I was out there, I says I'm going to a circus over Mishawaka next Wednesday night. You want to go along? And she said, you said I'd never been to carnival.
But of course that wasn't that night.
That was on a Wednesday night.
Yes, but not when we went to Hudson Lake. This was after I went to Indianapolis. And
I know.
Yes. All right.
Yeah.
Now, honey.
No, wait a minute, honey. You did go with me that night. We went to Mishawaka, I come back, and I dumped you off. And then you went to Indianapolis. And then somehow, I don't know how we got started again. Huh?
No, because I even said to Hensel, now when he stops, you see me to the door.
I know you said that.
Okay.
That was, sure I know you said that.
I said, I don't want him to see me to the door. Hensel, you see to it that I get the door while he goes and parks. So when he went to park the car, I jumped out quick and asked me to go to a circus. And I thought, well, I don't know whether I want to go or not. But I went, and I had such a nice time that I fell like that for him. And that was it. I wrote he and I wrote a letter to my boyfriend, and we both read it. Then we both read it. This is terrible to say. Your kids will say she was nutty. But anyway, after I got married, I've been so happy that I never, like my girlfriends, oh gee, I wish we could do this, I wish we could do that. Whatever we did together. And I've been absolutely, for 56 years coming up, I've been one of the happiest dames ever.
Dames?
Dames.
When you were growing up, what is that?
May I add this? I had Doris. She was going to school at the time. We were married. No, that's our daughter.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I misunderstood.
And that's our daughter, and she was 5 years old. No, she was 6 years old, and she had entered school that fall.
When you got married?
Yeah, and Grandpa and Grandma said, don't take her out. Let her finish the year. But Grandma started crying when we told her we were going to get married, and she said, please don't take my baby away from me. She had him since he was 10 days old. And he was such a sickly little thing, and she was just up with him day and night. And so, of course, we said no, we wouldn't. And then Doris came to live with us when she was 6. And she was a great gal, never gave us any trouble, whatever. And then when the war came, she worked at Bendix in the mailing department and came home one day and said, I'm going to have visitor tonight. I want you to meet. And it was the lady that was signing him up for the wax, which was the Army Corps. And we were heartbroken. We said, oh, we just don't want her to go. And she said, I'm going to be 21 in March. And it was just probably 3 weeks before. And she said, and then I'm going. She said, I want to go so badly. So we said, if that's it, that's it. So then, of course, she married a fella, a hillbilly up there, and has had a very, very bad life. She has 9 children, and one died, and one, I gave away, but one was adopted. So she has 7 children now. Now Dick and Katie got married, and Katie's a great gal, and of course Dick, he's our teddy bear. He's just a darling boy. And he had Paul and Tim. And now Paul has 3. Paul married Sue, and Tim married Shelley. I can't say the last names because I don't remember. And Paul has 3 children. He's got Adam, Andrew, and Eric. Eric with an A-R, so they're all A's. And they're just great, great. We're very, very close. So, now, what did you want to ask me?
When you were growing up, what was it like to grow up, I guess you grew up all along in Indiana, right?
Yes, South Bend, Indiana.
Was it, when you were going to, do you remember when you were going to grade school? I barely remember when I was
Oh, yes. First, I went to St. Stanislaus, a Polish school, in order to receive my communion. At that time, you received your first communion, then you received your Holy Communion, 2 times. That was, first was a preparation, and then my dad didn't believe in that. My dad says when you receive communion, that was it. So when I was in the 4th grade and made my communion, he jerked me out and put me in the public school.
Why didn't he want you in the private one?
In a Polish school, because they taught Polish, and the nuns could hardly speak English, and and he just wanted us to have a better education. And then I went to Linden School until the 8th grade. Then I went to junior high, the 7th grade, and the junior high was 8th and 9th grade, and then South Bend Central High School. And this year will be 63 years ago I graduated from high school.
How did you like going to, was it a fun high school?
Oh, we had great times. We had a lot of fun. Everybody was, there was no fear of anyone. And everyone minded the teachers. And if they didn't, they were taken by the collar and out they went. It was great. And even when I was dating, there was Palais Royal, which was a beautiful, beautiful dance hall, was the place there. All the Notre Dame boys and everybody, the higher class went there, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
The other one was, what was the other one? Tokyo, was that it? That dance hall down the line, Turner's. Tokyo, I believe they called it. Where the other?
We only had one big one in South.
Yeah, but with
There's some around Hudson Lake and.
Well, also at Playland Park, they had a big one. Yeah. But we would come home if we didn't date at the dance, and everybody walked home. It would be 1:30, and my girlfriend and I would walk 13 blocks from town, and then she had. No, when we'd get. Well, this was our joke. When we'd get boyfriends. And sometime they'd be from our place, maybe there'd be four boys that said, we'll walk home with you. We had a Rose Milner, that was my very best girlfriend, and we always had ideas. Okay, if you walk home with us, you got to go all the way. Oh, yes. There was a cemetery just about a block, 2 blocks away from us. So we'd go right through that cemetery, and those boys would be just so scared, they'd just be petrified, and we had more fun taking them through that 1 o'clock at night, taking them through the cemetery. We were something, but we had fun. Everybody had fun. Nobody talked sex. Nobody cursed. Nobody said, if somebody said Jesus or God, forget it. I don't dance with you. You know what I mean. Everybody was just... Times have changed so that I'm so happy. I'm
no such thing as marriage. Marriage, all were many hustles in those days.
Oh yeah, come closer, honey. Come closer so you can hear you. No muggings. No muggings. No.
Nothing like that?
No, we had. You know how we had doors that had skeleton keys. You bought them at the dime store. Put a skeleton key if you wanted to get in, and you forgot your key, and you had a key, and somebody let the skeleton key in. All you did was work the skeleton key, and it would fall on the floor, and you'd get in.
Why'd you have a lock then?
Well, just matter of course, I guess. I don't know why. I just have no idea.
So it's the crime wasn't...
Nothing. Nothing. We were never afraid to go with any of the boys that asked us if they had a car to take us home. Nothing. We were, and everyone was strangers, you know, at that time. And of course we had street cars, but they didn't run after 12. And of course, Palais never closed till 12:30.
How old were you when you stayed out till like 1:30?
My dad didn't let me date till I was out of high school, 18 years old.
So you were 18 when you stayed out till 1:30?
Yes. I made high school, I have to put this in 3.5 years, because of the fact I came in during the winter, and there was no big graduation in January. You either went 3.5 or 4.5. So I made it in 3.5 in order to graduate. And I was 18 in December, and I graduated because you see my birthday was in December, that I had to start school late.
Okay.
So that's it.
What did you do when you were in high school? What kind of places did you go to?
What do you mean, honey?
Well, you know, like when I was in high school, we didn't really, there wasn't really anything to do besides work, and there was nothing to do.
That's it. After school, there were shows of all kinds, nickel and dime shows, and they were all very, what shall I say, honey, very up shows. And sometime after school, we'd go to shows. Otherwise, we went home. Sometime we'd go to the ice cream parlors, were all over. We'd gather at one of those and come home. And of course, we followed basketball and football and things that we had at school doings, but not many of those. So we just know. We were very close-knit to families. We'd gather, families would gather every Sunday. You'd either go to an aunt, this aunt's house, that aunt's house, or they'd come over to your house just to visit.
Really?
And
Well, it didn't have transportation in those days to get you out of town.
No.
No cars?
No, we had the first car in the family. No, Uncle William had the first car because he had a business and he had to have a car.
I was 15 years old before we got the first car.
Come closer, honey, so they can
Sorry, I think it picks it up.
fix it up. Yeah.
And how late were you allowed to stay out when you were in your school? high school?
Well, there just never was anything late.
Never.
If we had a ball game, it was always right after school, basketball game, and come home. That's it. We just didn't go out at night. At that when I was in school, and then later on, when we had our junior prom was the first big dance that you had. And we had plays that we have at night that we'd all go to, my folks, and a lot of times I was usually in the chorus part or something like that. But outside of that, it was very satisfying because we just seemed to, and we had not even a radio. Not even radio. We had a Victrola.
Who was your favorite singer then? Favorite music? Did you have any?
Later on.
I was
Not
20 years old before I heard the first radio.
how old
20.
was that when I?
When
No,
we had,
Crystal.
Crystal says she had an earphone, and only one at a time could listen to it, the earphone.
I was working as an abstractor for Abstract and Title Company, and there was a youngster there that said, I build those little crystal phones. And what was it, Philadelphia?
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Were the only ones. And he made that
Boy, we
little
were all
sit.
We had great guns. We get KDKD, Pittsburgh.
That was a big thing? That was a big
That was the big one.
And we all listened to that. He'd listen for a while, and I'd listen. You had one little thing. Take that off and sit down.
Great days.
Well, what'd you do after you graduated high school? Did you work?
Oh yes. And during my junior, senior year, they would find jobs for you. And I went and addressed envelopes, and then I went to Wyman's, was one of our elite stores, like Diamonds.
I've heard that before, Wyman's.
Wyman's and Ellsworth's, and I got a job at Wyman's, and I'd go after school, but not till you're a junior, senior. They wouldn't allow you to work until then. You had to have a permit from your principal to work. And then when I came out, I just started to work at Wyman's and just stayed there till this fella came along that lived in the neighborhood, and of course he was an attorney, and he bought an abstract and title company, and he said, wouldn't you like to come and work for me, because the stores were open till 9 o'clock on a Saturday, but nothing on a Sunday. Nothing was open.
No
grocery stores, no nothing. But at the abstract company, I would only work from 8 to 5, and no Saturday work and no Sunday, because we had to work at the courthouse, and the courthouse wasn't open on
Right.
So of course I changed to there, and then of course I changed a number of times.
Did anyone think of going to college then? Was that a college?
Only the very elite. The very elite went
Is that
to
because it was like
college.
a cost thing? It cost a lot of
Oh,
money?
yes, and after all, you didn't, if you made $12 a week, you were doing darn good, and 15, that was it.
That was really good money.
It's real good.
What did college cost back then, do you know?
Now Harold, when he came out of high school, then he went to what they called normal.
Yeah.
That's just like your Glendale. And he went for 2 years.
No. It used to be, you graduate out of high school, and then you had a 12-week normal, what they call a normal
Oh,
course.
12. Oh.
And then you took an examination you could teach.
So we
Teach school.
That's 3
Well,
months.
after that, now, of course, my buddy, crazy nut, he's dead now, though.
Well, honey, they don't care about
But he kept on going and going and going until he was able to get to college. And he finally went through really a teacher's college down in Indiana, but he got to be coach of the football team and never played a game in his life. Football was his coach.
But you did go to teach.
Well, I know.
Yes.
That course, I finished up. I had signed the contract to teach, and my dad broke his arm.
Oh.
We had, in those days, you had crank automobiles. You had to crank them. And he went out to start our car. And kicked back on him and broke his arm, broke his wrist here.
Oh, many people.
And so the corn crop and everything else was laying out there, so I had to take care of the farm. Well, his arm healed up, but it never did heal up right. It wasn't set right, but anyway, that's the reason I never talked.
Oh, I thought your mother said you went that week.
I went and I substituted for 3 days, and that was it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I know that.
Said you gotta continue, don't teach them to that little butts. I couldn't get along with
Well,
them. I didn't have patience enough with them.
Well, honey, wasn't it just one room school?
Yeah.
Where it was from first?
No, it was out Atwood, and it was
I see.
the 4th and 5th grade together.
I see.
In that room. It was out Atwood there, but and the girl that I substituted for, she was so down easy going that the kids would do anything with her, and I couldn't take it. They had to get down there, their nose in the books, or they wasn't working for me, so I said no more. I'd be kicked out of every school if I had to. That parents have been all over me. So that was it. I didn't teach anymore.
I guess so.
How long did you guys date before you got married?
We started dating the 4th of July and were married the 30th of October.
So is that 6 months?
No, not even 6 months.
No.
Well, that was the first. We did things steady, so
4th of July we
4th
started.
of July you went down to Indianapolis
And came
stayed
back.
in the Claypool Hotel.
Yeah, and came back.
I came back, and it was a week or two after that before we really started
Oh,
going.
well, all right.
It must have been more or less
October.
1st of August before it really started. And then I went eat downtown. I didn't board at her sister next door, but I went down there and she'd go down and eat supper with me every night. She wouldn't eat, but then she'd go down there with me every night.
Is that considered fast back then, or was that normal to get married that quickly after you started dating?
Well, some did, some didn't. It didn't matter. It didn't matter.
For that age, it didn't matter?
No,
Because you were pretty old, like Susan, when she started.
Yes, uh-huh.
Because like with Kathy and I, we dated when we were...
I know,
she was young, so it
yeah.
dragged on a long time.
No. Now, I was going 4 years with my other boyfriend.
4 years, 3 months.
Did you ever consider that you were going to marry him, or...?
Well, we talked about it, but I just, I was so interested in, I guess it just didn't enter my mind to really, we'd talk about it and this and that, but...
Did you consider when you first started dating him, or did you just say, let's get married? We started going, and I think about the 4th date we decided. The 4th date?
About the 4th date.
Did it scare you?
No, I was completely befuddled. It was here, nothing. I didn't care whether he was black, white, purple, or orange. He was the one.
What would you say made you do that?
I have no idea. Oh, I had a very, very active. In fact, he would sit at my sister's place because in the evening, and I'd come over there. Did I bring Virgil or any or
Yeah, we had all kinds of dates.
And I'd bring
I
over
thought you was about the wildest woman ever happened.
because the fact that my sister had a Victrola and Reed Charleston, And I'd come over to we'd go over to her house to play the Victrola so we could Charleston, see? We didn't have a Victrola at that time, and later on I bought one.
Well, then after you got married, what did you do? When did you start going out? When was Prohibition? One night.
Oh, at that time. He took me to a couple places and scared me to death.
And you told me about that. There's a couple of speakeasies, right?
Yes.
How did you get to know those speakeasies, Grandpa?
He knew every one of them.
I had a couple of buddies in Bendix that knew him. And the other guys introduced me to him. Boy, that was wild times. That was speaking. I had a buddy in Bendix. I didn't know it for quite a while, but I knew he always had a lot of spending money, and I couldn't figure him out.
Your grandchildren are going to hear that.
And finally I found out he had a big Hudson car. I found out that he'd take a trip into Canada and load that car up with good whiskey. Get good whiskey in Canada. We didn't have it here. And he come down, he was a good Lincoln. And it never did get, because he was a darn Jew, never did get caught. And
well, you paid.
They paid you for that, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So, but I didn't know that when I was by my boy. He was the slickest dancer. I had never seen a guy in my life, and he was afraid of there on his feet. But I never knew it till I quit bumming around with him. I was with a bunch one day, and I got talking about Bill Reader. I said, Bill Reader? And I said, yeah. He said, you know him? I said, I used to bum around with him. He said, boy. And he still worked at Bendix. Finally, he got the doggone much money. He bought land up north of South Bend there, built a couple of buildings. Rented them out.
Well, the one that I was telling you about, you know, Notre Dame always played their big games at Soldier Field in Chicago.
So the Bears play now.
Yeah, that's where because there was no stadium till Rockney built one, you know. So, of course, the boyfriend and Millie and Joe Belding, we went up there, and they all wanted lasagna. I never tasted lasagna in my life. Art said, I know a swell speakeasy.
This is Art.
Art, my musician.
Oh. Okay.
And we went, and he knocked on the door, and there was a little slot like Bill's have. They opened the door and looked, and of course, I don't know what Art said to him because he played a lot in Chicago. So he shut the door and he let us in. Oh God, it was spooky. Everything was red velvet, huge drapes, and in between the doors, everything was red velvet. And every now and then you saw that red velvet open up a little and look. So they brought that lasagna and hot wine with it. Well, I took one bite of that lasagna and I thought, oh, I couldn't eat it. I can't eat it till today. But they thought it was delicious. But I just sat there and shook and looked and knew which one was going to shoot first.
It was a little too wild for you, the wild girl.
Well, you know, I never was. We went to South Bend speakeasies, but nothing like that. That was an honest-to-God gangster one.
Well, that was, I got into an Al Capone joint one night. I worked with a fellow in Bendix, and his parents lived in Chicago. So he invited me, that's before I knew Mama. Well, I knew her, but I wasn't dating with her. So he wanted me to go down to his folks over the weekend. I had a car and he didn't.
You want a flashlight?
So I drove down, we drove down, and we had much more got there. Larry says, I wonder if Frank's out in park, and we're right across from a big park down there. Lincoln Park, too, right across. So we walked out there, and sure enough, we bumped into his buddy. He was a policeman, and he had to park. He was on the ship, and all he did was control the park out there. So the guy said that he was a single fellow. He said, well, I'll tell you, I'll pick you up at 7 o'clock tonight and we'll go out on the town. Well, I had no idea what he was talking about, so he picked us up at 7 o'clock and we went down the middle of Chicago, someplace down the loop. Went down one step, he tapped on the door, and the people opened up, and he gives them some kind of a flyby where there's a policeman now, the cop. We go down another one, and the same thing, same rigmarole. We opened up, and boy, if you ever seen a beautiful bar, on one whole side was bar, bright lights, and you walk up there, and it seemed like it was that thing. It was Persian rug or whatever you call it. And, of course, this policeman was like this with the manager. So the manager takes us right back in his office. And you talk about it was all Canadian liquor. Man, there was no bootleg business or anything like that. And you talk about accommodations, they had it. You had anything more liquor than girls there.
Well, now, honey, they want to know about our life. Now, let's talk about our life.
That's well, that's not interesting at all.
Yes. Yes, we moved, it was Depression.
Depression, wow. So where were we in the Depression?
And we moved to Milwaukee because he was offered a good job up there, so we moved to Milwaukee, and the job fell through. So, of course, Doris and he and I, we rented a little apartment, and I happened to have friends up there, or we did, and they got me in the Boston store. Same Boston? Yes, up there. And how it happened, I never worked in a store like that in my life. I was always in the office, but they had, you don't remember the Didy doll. That was the first doll that went.
What was the name of that?
Fly Shaker and Bomb, but it was a Didy doll.
Was that the name of the doll?
Didy doll, yes. And he came in and said, we need a demonstrator, but we aren't having the Didy doll. We're having a promotion for a Patsy doll, which was about this tall and was all dressed, but it was by Fly Shaker and Bomb, who made the best dolls at that time. Along with it, they got a little doll that was a bonus. And this was in, well, early part, probably August, and they were laying away for Christmas. So he said, how about it? And I said, I can handle it. Give me some material. So he said, well, I don't have anything, but here's a little something to read up. Well, all it said was, didn't tell me anything about how it was made or anything. Well, I prayed all night, and I thought, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Well, I got in the store, and the people, because Milwaukee didn't know Depression, did they, honey?
They didn't know, no, they didn't know. Northern Milwaukee didn't
all
have a Depression.
German people there, they didn't have a Depression. Both entrances were filled with women, and they said, there's your people there. And I thought, what am I going to say? Well, they came around, they flocked around me, and I didn't have to take orders. All I had to do was talk about it and how lovely they were and how they would give them, and they'd ask me more questions. My little daughter has a small doll, but it's cracking. Well, I thought, what am I going to tell her? I said, well, did she have it in a cold cold room and then eventually put it in the warm. Yes, she did, because her room is, that's why. Oh, I made up stories, and that day I ran $460-some in sales, because all I do is turn it over to the girls. Well, from that day on, I had a job with Divey Doll Company. Then then I worked upstairs just for them. They had all kinds of dolls, and Doris, of course, was 8 at that time, and I'd bring home beautiful layettes and dolls for her and everything else, and it's $50 a week.
Is that good?
Well, that was magnificent.
So I thought you said 13 was good.
That at that time, yes.
So later on it was 15,
Because,
right?
yes, and I was making 17 that they were paying, because don't forget, I was a demonstrator and I didn't take sales. I just talked it up and gave it to the other girls. It was up to me to, and I made 17 plus all kinds. They'd say, get rid of that stuff. We'll give you 50 cents for selling that, or 25 cents if you sell those things. So I really did. And then Grandpa, he went to selling Hoovers. And he was making real good, because he would go in the stores. They had, you know, that's where they were, and the customers would come in, and then, of course, he gave him his name, and he'd go out. But along came your daddy.
Ruined the whole thing.
How old were you?
I was 32 years old.
Wow.
And,
Jeez.
and yeah, and along came he, and I worked. He was born in February, and I worked till January 1st after Christmas, where I got rid of all my things and everything and left them in the goods. And they said, well, when he gets a little older and you get a babysitter for us, come back to work. Well, I never did. But then he'll hate.
You escaped depression by, because you were in Milwaukee.
Yeah, oh yes, yes. We weren't, we didn't suffer so
Well, the thing
much.
about me, oh, don't say we didn't suffer.
Oh, well, we
But
lived.
anyhow, Roosevelt come in. Now, your dad don't like me, or your Uncle Bill don't like me, because I am dead set against Republicans. Don't talk Republican to me. I lived through Coolidge and Hoover. And they happened to bring on the Great Depression that Mom and I went through. I had $160 to get married on. I had a good friend, cousin of mine, that was a stockholder in a bank down there. And he went by bail, so to speak. But
Immaterial.
then I come, there's only been one Republican I voted for, and that was Nixon, due to the fact that the son of a buck was going to get us out of Vietnam, right now. Right now, he's going to get us out of Vietnam. Well, 8 years later, he got us out of Vietnam, and that was it. That was Nixon. And I would love to be able, if I could, to debate this darn Reagan. One night I sat there and he says, are you people happy? We're almost $1 trillion in debt. Almost $1 trillion in debt. And we're going to have a balanced budget. 2 years later, on one of his newscasts, one of the guys says, I thought you said you was going to have a balanced budget. He says, I didn't say we was going to have a balanced budget. I said it was our goal to have a balanced budget. The lying son of a bitch. And he come right out and he says, we're going to have a balanced budget. And then he says, I didn't say that. On why the Democrats didn't take that thing and bring it out.
All right.
But I remember that as well as I remember anything in my life.
All right. Then we moved back to South Bend, because your daddy was,
Yeah.
I was so selfish, and I didn't have any idea. He was,
You didn't know what to do with it?
I didn't know what to do with him. And
Really?
my mother just loved him to
Well,
death.
he had what they called a 12-month colic.
Yeah,
In
well,
those days, he had, boy, poor kid.
12-month what?
colic.
12-month colic.
What's that?
Well, he cried day and night. He'd
Get
cry.
gas in his stomach. and he blew it up, and you think he's going to blow open. And we didn't dare to give him them drafts or anything, and the old grandmas, we had him to every expert in town, baby expert, baby specialist, but the old grandma says 12 months, that's it. Sure enough, we get that special formula and jello water, you name it, we give it to him.
Well, then we lived till he was, let's see, he was 3 years old. 1, 2, yes. And we moved, Dad was he was selling insurance. Grandpa was selling insurance for Commonwealth. And he was promoted and moved to Dayton.
Yeah.
Well, we moved to Dayton. And then they moved him back to South Bend. Then they moved him to Louisville, Kentucky. And that's where your dad started kindergarten. And then the war broke out. So Grandpa had to go to DuPont plant, which was manufacturing gunpowder, and he worked there. Then Grandpa Goshert got very, very ill. He was 83 years old, and we didn't think we'd save him. We had no idea what was the matter, so we decided, with gasoline was rationed, everything was rationed, we decided while we can, we better get back to South Bend. So we got back to South Bend. He went back to Bendix to work, and then along came Bill. I was 39 by that time. And Jack was in the second grade. He was 7 years old. And then 33 months later, when I was 42, along came Jim.
Was that unusual to have children that
No, Katoskis, they had 9, and she seemed like when I had one, she had one, and so did Robeson, and there was nothing at that.
Wasn't it unusual that you just had 3, though? I mean, you named off all these families that had 7, 8, 9.
Well,
how did you get around that, if you don't mind me asking?
Just didn't try that hard. Every one of them was a surprise. But,
when I started to say, things were rough, Roosevelt come in.
Honey, they don't care about that. They want to know
They don't.
They want to know.
They want to know something about the Depression.
Oh, they want.
We had 25% unemployment. Roosevelt put in what he called a WPA.
I remember reading that.
And the guys got $64 a month. That's what they got for working, and it seemed to me like I didn't go. I knew fellows, college graduates and everything was on WPA. But I did everything in the world to stay off of that because I
That was like a welfare to you?
No, it wasn't welfare. You earned it.
It seemed like welfare to me.
Well, of course, at that time.
That was it, and I did everything in the world to stay off of it.
And we paid 9 cents a dozen for eggs, hamburger.
Well, I forget now.
3 pounds for a quarter, I think.
I know about
nickel a loaf of bread.
The war come along and gasoline was rationed. Boy, you had to watch yourself.
Shoes were rationed.
Shoes were rationed. You couldn't get cigarettes.
Oh no.
You couldn't get beef at all. I finally got back to South Bend when my dad and I went to work for a paper company, wholesale paper company. And they gave me a route, opened up around Syracuse, Indiana.
Honey, that was after the war then.
Well,
yeah, when Bendix,
right after the war.
Bendix, everybody was laid off at Bendix.
And so I found a butcher down there in Napanee, Indiana. They butchered on a Friday. If you got down there and got lucky, you'd get some hamburger and get some liver or something like that. And then another one on Syracuse, the locker room down there, they butchered on a Wednesday. So I arranged my territory. So I hit Syracuse on a Wednesday, Avenue on a Friday. And I carried a nice, I took Claire with me one time, but I carried a nice box with me. And I'd get some hamburger, get some liver, maybe a heart now and then. We had some friends.
Hoopers, she's going to come here this morning.
Over on Western Avenue, the meat market over there, they was butchering horses.
They were selling horse meat.
Oh, really? That was considered common then, right?
Oh, yes. We never ate it, but Hoovers, they lived on it because they couldn't get meat.
So we give over about a pound and a half of hamburger one night.
More than that, yes.
Oh, boy. They both bawled. Both cried.
Well, and then I would go to, we have a beautiful country market there. And all the farmers come in with their things. Well, I got acquainted with one of the ladies, and you'd have to stand in line. For anything you wanted, you had to stand in line. And chickens. There were only so many people, so many chickens. When they were gone, they were gone. And I had this Aunt Frances that lived near and she had nowhere to go to get anything. So my mother and I'd get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and be there when they opened up. And she'd usually come about 5:30, the farmer lady. And I'd say, now wait just a minute. I'd say, what would you want? What don't you have that maybe I could get? Cigarettes? No cigarettes. She said, my daughter has a family and she has no soap to wash. I said, I'll get you soap. She said, I'll furnish you with chickens and ducks.
And you made a deal out, huh?
Oh, every Saturday she'd have it all ready for me, and I'd have soap because we traded at about 3 different places, and the soap was hard to get. But when they'd have it, they'd always save it for the good customers. So I always had soap on hand, and I'd take her 2 big boxes of soap, and that's the way we lived. And everybody loved us because we were the only ones that were my mother and my sister, she depended on us, and it seemed like lamb was easier to get at that time.
Yeah.
But outside of that, and
so you really were kind of were the stability part of the family. You financially, you always seemed to be able to find a way to.
Well, see, Clara worked and Hensel worked, and then he smoked, but good, and so did Grandpa. But my mother, because Grandpa would not let me work. He said, you've got a family, you raise your family, you stay at home. We can do it on my wages. So
we did it all right. We didn't splurge any.
We lived from hand to mouth, but anyway. So I would go take Grandpa to work, take Jim to school, and at that time, I think I only had Bill. And I would go over, pick my mother up, then we'd go through town. She'd say, there's a line. I'd stop, we'd run, we'd get in line for cigarettes, and the men would look at her, there's an old lady set in line, and one to a customer. Maybe we'd get 3-4 places that day. So we supplied Hensel and him. And then, of course, Cools they're horrible mentholated, yeah. But they seem to be the most available. So he wouldn't smoke them, neither did Hensel, but his boss never could get cigarettes, and so he would take his boss's cigarettes. We just had a lot of fun.
Yeah, made a lot of favors that way too, right?
Yeah. Well, no, you don't make favors at Bendix. It was just out of the goodness of our heart that we did.
Okay.
But he said, I don't care what they are, just so they're cigarettes. So that was our life. And then, of course, after that.
Well, when you were when you were, just to kind of digress a little bit, when you first got married, did you live in a little apartment or a house?
Yes, we lived in an apartment, and from there we moved into a partly furnished house. We had some furniture that we bought and some...
And you rented that?
Yes, we rented.
When we went to Milwaukee that time, when we moved up there, we had a living room with a folding bed, davenport, and a kitchen. $8 a week. That's what we lived in up there.
Really? When did you first buy your first house?
We didn't
Never
buy,
bought a house?
No.
You've never owned any?
Yes, we did. Grandpa Terzinski willed us a home, but it was an old house.
Honey, we started living in it then. In those days they had rent control.
Yes.
And he was only getting $15 a month, and we were paying him $35 a month on that. And when he left, when he died.
No, this was before he died that we got it.
Huh?
Before we died that we got it. Because
not very much before.
Because we did the upstairs. Your folks were there.
Your mother wasn't there. Well, your mother was alive, but your dad wasn't. Now, wait a minute. Now,
Grandma Goshert, and he died in 55.
Do you remember? Now, wait a minute. Now, let me talk, honey. Do you remember when I was up there, Jacob, when I was up there, and we were tiling the bathroom?
Yes.
Your mother come up, and she was so surprised that I was doing something like that, and your dad never seen that upstairs period, honey.
Grandpa and your mother and your mother and my dad died in 55.
Yeah.
And the upstairs was done because Grandma and Grandpa lived downstairs, and we had to do the upstairs. Yes.
How old was I when I got the mortgage to do the upstairs? How old was I?
Well, I don't know, but
I was 55 years old.
She lived.
I was 55 years old when I got the mortgage.
Well, anyway.
To do it.
So then we had this home. We completely redone it, just the way we wanted it. It was just grand.
Was that the house that I visited when I was there?
Yes. And we just loved it very much. 8 blocks from town. The kids could walk to town, and they had Colfax School was right there where they had a lot of fun. Yeah. They went to Holy Cross, but summertime they lived there because they always had an instructor, and they had baseball teams and everything. And then after your dad got married, after Bill went to the Air Force, Jim was all alone. And he just didn't know what to do with himself. He was just going wild. So we decided we'd get Notre Dame boys in there, because we had a downstairs bathroom and a bedroom, completely private. And upstairs we had 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. So he had 1 bedroom, and we rented to 2 Notre Dame boys, and what a happy boy he was.
Really?
So we had Notre Dame boys well, in fact, you had met, you don't remember, but you did meet George Anderson when your whole family was there. He came to meet you fellas, but you don't remember. That was our last boy.
I barely remember that.
Yeah.
I just remember it was really hot and humid.
All right. Now, I think that's about... Then, of course, we decided the colored started to come in, and they were taking over. And
you didn't like that? It was not good.
It was scary. Scary. Do you remember when you ran outside and you yelled at those colored kids?
I remember I was going to kill.
Yes, and they came back, and we had the front door open, and they threw a stink bomb in. They were about 12, 13 years old. We had to shut that door because that was just like a gas bomb, you know.
It was scary. I remember they all surrounded me. They were big.
So we were, and then we sold the house, and we went into an apartment.
About $10,000 loss on it.
Yes,
Really? 'Cause the neighborhood went down.
yes. yes. They said, oh, if this house was just anywhere else. But anyway, then we moved here.
I had a neighbor west of us, poor guy, put $6,000, bought the house, $6,000. And he worked, and his wife worked, and they put $9,000 more on it. Dollar come in, he got scared, he got $4,000 out of it. And then he did collect all of that because we went on a land contract, and they
then he got it back, and it was just a wreck.
Yeah.
So that's the way we were afraid, those things would happen. But we sold it to a lovely, the real estate man was really lovely. He sold it to a very nice, young, married couple. They were mulattoes, really. And he worked at Bendix, and he got a veteran's loan, and we got cash for it. So that was great. So then in '69, we moved down here.
And was Uncle Bill already there?
Uncle Bill was out of school. He came out of high school, and I was working for 8 years. I was working for I was very active in politics down there. And I was working in the police department in the records room. And we were, of course, caged off. And he had a pal named Al Lynn. And we had him registered to go to Indiana University in South Bend. That was just part of the one in Bloomington, for 2 years, and then go there. Well, one afternoon, here comes Bill. He was graduated from high school, he and Elle, and they said, Irene, there's Bill. And I went up the door, and he said, Mom, would you care if I joined the service and didn't go to college? And things drained. I said, Bill, if that's what you want for your life, that's it. Good, because Elle and I signed up already.
That's where I got that from.
Yep. So
He's
there
great.
he went, but boy, and he said, I can't stand even the smell of school when I enter,
Really?
books and crayons and everything. And he said, I'm not going to college. Well, when he was in Air Force for 4 years, Vietnam, Da Nang, Da Nang was horrible at that time. He was right in it. And he volunteered to go. When he came back, that's all he could talk about was college. But he said, but he had already visited you guys here, and he loved Phoenix. He said, do you care if I go down there? We said, anything, just so.
How did you feel when he volunteered to go to Vietnam?
Oh, he called me up that night, and Joe Brablick and Joe, I forget the other guy's name, from Notre Dame, they were upstairs, and Jim answered the phone. He said, Mom, Bill's on the phone. So they listened, see? And he said, Mom, I just got news to tell you. I'm leaving for Vietnam tomorrow, and I'll be located in Da Nang. And I said, are they sending you? No, I volunteered to go. I want to get out of this mountain home. They're not sending me anywhere, and I want to get out of it. And I said, well, honey, I just wish you the best and all that stuff.
Was Vietnam really bad when he was
Oh.
You heard that?
And I hung up, and I went, boo-hoo-hoo-hoo. I just cried and cried. And the kids came down, and Dad and I, we were, I tell you, and I was working then. I had surgery, and we lost the mayor election. Republicans took over, so all the Democrats were out. So then I didn't want to go to work, but they kept calling me because I was a precinct committee man, and I had charge of a precinct. They kept calling me, come on down, we need you, we'll put you in the...
The Republicans called you?
No, Democrats. They were the state, and they were running the license bureau. Come on down to the license bureau. So I went, and the girls were so sweet. It was Da Nang this, Da Nang that. They're just, doing this and that to Da Nang. And I was so worked up, and they would get the paper in the morning, but they'd hide it so I wouldn't see it in the morning. And I wouldn't know anything about it till I'd get home, you know. And they were just all so worked up about Bill.
Was he in active combat, or
he was MP?
No, Bill was, he was in the Air Force, and he went out there as a guard in the Air Force. And he,
police. He was air police.
well, yeah, he was in the police or guard, and he went out, his sergeant took him out to his station one night to guard. He was out on the perimeter of Da Nang, of their base up there. And we stand there talking to the guard, and here once in a while the guard would, damn that mosquitoes. And here was tracer bullets. Bill happened to see one.
Yeah, it was. There were little lights.
Up there shooting at him.
Because
the guy didn't realize it was bullets, but it was. Bill happened to see one of them coming. He says, "Duck." So they ducked down, and that was what it was.
Because the enemy was just right across from them.
Yeah, out there in the marsh.
But tell about the Marines. Why he hated the Marines.
Huh?
Tell about the Marines, why he hated the Marines so. Remember, the truckload was coming through, and they were making fun of Bill because he was
MP, Air Force.
Air Force police, you know, and everything. And he yelled for them to stop. And they stopped, and the head man jumped out and came to him. He said, what's the trouble? And he said, about them calling him names and making fun, and he said, the head sergeant or whatever was went up and said, "Who did it?" One of the fellows, "He did it." And he turned around and he hauled off and he hit him till he fell off of the truck. And then they went on. So he said,
Lord.
So, and then too, Bill said one of his, well, he can tell you this.
Well, that's all right. Don't worry about it.
He said, Vietnamese, you never knew who was good and who was bad, and they had one of them come in and clean their place up, you know, everything in daytime. And
That was Joe Bradley that told that.
no, that was Bill. And he said that night a bomb went off, and this fella was the one that set the bomb off in their barracks. So, well, Bill got money for being shot at from the government too, and we bought him a watch when he went. Well, in fact, we sent it to him, and it had the date on so that, you know, he would know, and we paid quite a bit for it. In fact, the jeweler was a Democratic guy that gave us a discount, and we paid a lot with the discount. And he said they'd go to town, and these little fellas, they were terrific at stripping you. And he said, the sergeant said, "Put your billfold in here." So they put the billfold in the pockets, and they were going like this so that the kids wouldn't take anything off them, see? And he was going like that, and they got into the bar, and he looked, he says, "My watch is gone." They stripped him. Well, that's it. Amen. Anything else you want to know?
I want to ask you what it was like to work with the Kennedy.
Oh, magnificent. Absolutely. He was just, we had a
Very shame when he couldn't have stayed on.
Yeah.
You met him several times?
Oh, no, just once.
Just once.
We had a dinner for him. That was before he was nominated, see. There were just a bunch of them running, and we had a dinner for him at Notre Dame at,
Morristown.
No, this was at the other place where we ate.
Yeah.
And then there was a professor, Ed
Doc Cronin.
Cronin, from
Professor
Notre
Notre
Dame.
Dame.
He was the chairman, and I was the co-chairman. We worked together on all this project. Then he and his wife and I and Harold went to Morris Inn, where he was staying, which is a lovely, lovely motel owned by Notre Dame, right on the ground. And he had a press meeting up there. They were waiting for him, all the newsmen and everything. And he let them go, and he came down. What was Ed's wife named Helen?
I don't remember.
Well, anyway, Ed was over here, and he said, I am your chairman, Ed Cronin, and this is my wife, Helen. And I said, and I am your co-chairman, Irene Goshert, and this is my wife, or my husband, Harold. And you know, and he shook hands. He had a very slight hand, very slight, and he was built slight, but he was adorable. And from that time on, he talked to us as if nobody was waiting for him. And it wasn't, what's your name or anything like that. It was Harold, Irene, Helen, you know. Just remember the names just like that.
They say politicians all have that phrase.
He was great. He was great. And then, of course, we worked for him until he was elected. Then Bobby, when Bobby ran for president,
Yeah.
because
I was
he was...
visiting with you when he was campaigning. He was assassinated. I was
Oh,
staying with you.
yeah, I remember. But he was in South Bend. And then his wife, Ethel, she was with him, too. So, of course, we, the head people of the party and their spouses, got to be in line and meet them. And he was even smaller than Jack. And he was great. And then Ethel shook hands, and she had her kid gloves on. And, oh, they were just, when you touched them, they were just beautiful skin gloves. I'll never forget it, you know, but she kept them on, and she was lovely. So we met both Kennedys.
But I'll tell you something. It's a dirty shame. But their brother Ed is the smartest one of the three.
He's the one that was killed in World War II.
No.
And
He's the one that Chappaquiddick thing.
Oh, Ed, I'm sorry. That was thinking of their older brother.
Now, what else did you want to ask me?
Well, when World War II was just starting to begin, you know, when
We were in
when you
Louisville.
first heard about, when did you first hear about Hitler?
Oh, well, Hitler took over Poland long before then, you know.
When did you hear about him when he first started coming into power? And did you
Well,
first hear about him when he did Poland?
Oh, yes, and it was in the paper all the time about him, you know, coming in. But I was working in Louisville. I was working at Sears and Roebuck's at that time. And we came in one Saturday, and we heard Roosevelt declaring war.
This is after Pearl Harbor.
Yes, and we heard him declaring war. And you know what Sears did? They had us all come in that very Sunday and work all Sunday, marking all the sheets, everything up in price, everything went up in price.
Really?
Yep.
Why do you think they did that?
Well, they knew that there would be a shortage of things.
So they didn't spend any, waste any
Nothing.
time.
We worked overtime to do that, yeah. And I'll never forget that. That's your capitalism.
Yeah, I'm afraid that is.
Yeah.
What, there was a World War II started and went on for a long time before we ever became involved with it.
Yes.
We were actually involved with it very little, and
well, we were involved because they were sending people over to England to help,
Right.
weren't they?
oh yeah, but those were more or less volunteerism.
Well, honey,
But our tax money was going over.
yeah, but
through Lend-Lease.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I had cousins. I still have one living that was days and
That's
days.
when we really got into
Yeah,
it, and
yeah.
it was drafted, and
Yeah.
boys were drafted and sent into it.
And they were days and days in trenches, soaking wet. He still has a lot of problems with his knees, and the other one died.
That's what burns me up.
What?
Hitler had built up one of the biggest and best military establishments that you could dream up in those days. And Japan ruined us out here at Hawaii. And our Navy practically knocked our Navy out. And yet we was able to turn around and welcome and really cleaned up on Hitler, and we could have cleaned up on Russia if they hadn't got Russia in on it. But nowadays, now Reagan says, oh boy, you hear him talk. We couldn't even whip little, what's her name at Gaddafi. But I'll never forget one of the last press conferences that Carter had. Somebody asked him what about Russia. He says, I'm not afraid of Russia, and Russia knows it. He says 30 bombs will annihilate Russia. He says we got 2,000. But gee whiz, now and with all the money we're pouring into defense, I don't see it. I can't.
Okay, now here is what I wore, and this is what Jim wore. He was in high school.
I remember seeing these. I've seen newspaper clippings of kids wearing this.
And oh, this is from the judge.
I remember reading the letter that you had.
Yeah, that's from the judge. Here's we bought stamps, and the kids would take 10 cents to school, and we'd buy them till they filled it up, and then we'd buy a war bond. But I just bought those just to have them on hand. But there's a letter that he wrote after he had got it. This is what I passed out when I really won. Boy, I won about 3 to 1.
You really landslided.
Oh, I
didn't realize you had to be elected to this. I thought.
Oh yes, you had to be elected.
What were your duties as a precinct committee then?
Call meetings and have parties for the people that were running for election and everything. And these are.
What made you first get into this, Grandma? Were you always political?
Well, no. One of the gals, I wasn't working at all. And she came over one day and she said, how come you're not out working for us? And I said, what do you mean? And she said, we'd like to have you. And of course my name was in the paper that I got elected and all that. Oh, this is my precious. Oh, I love that picture. They sent it before he was killed. I just think that is the most beautiful picture that there is.
And you said he was a slight man?
Very slight.
You wouldn't think that when he was
No, but he wasn't very tall. He wasn't very tall.
Trifle taller than I am. Of course, when he was campaigning, his shoulder blades stuck right out when we met him.
There's Bertie Pye. He was one of them that I worked for. Well, and there's another picture of him, and there's Mom's stuff, and oh, now, this, I always wondered, do you know, no, that's John Montgomery, that isn't the one I want. For Birch Bayh, I was invited to his inaugural thing, and there are a lot of things here that for inauguration there I was invited to and look at that if you want to. I think you've seen that though. But I had something.
What was the? I forgot.
When he was inaugurated, we were invited to the inauguration.
But we couldn't afford to go.
Well, yes, because Frida went, but don't you remember? They didn't even get to go because it was so horrible.
Why were you invited?
Because we worked for him. We were one of his people.
What made you take that job? That's what I was wondering. You just took some secretarial job? Or?
No. They asked me at that time, he was Catholic, and everybody wanted to stay away from him. And there's a picture.
Nobody thought he had a chance because he was Catholic.
I remember that was a big thing.
Yeah.
A big issue of it.
Yeah. Mama, her buddy, her co-chairman, we had a place
There's
over
my dad.
in South Bend at River Park. They said it was a hotbed of a Ku Klux Klan.
It really was.
So went over there to
I'd have to go and speak, and give out literature and everything.
We were going to different clubs and so forth and campaigning. And Mama and Doc took me over there. The first thing I knew, I looked around and both of them were gone. And I was there arguing with the gals on clusters all by myself, and they dug out and went over to Mishawaka. It's where I'm living today.
Oh,
I got some pretty hot arguments with them over there. They was absolutely against Catholicism. And
Yeah, the Klan is Protestant, white.
Johnny Bredemus, he was one of my favorite. I always said he was going to run for president, but he never did.
When you were when it was first, when Germany first started attacking things like Poland and that kind of thing, and then it even started attacking things like countries like France and England. Now, I've read a lot of stuff about this, and they said for a long time the feeling in the nation was was isolation, and we don't want to be involved with the European affairs. Was that what your opinion was?
No. Well, of course, we didn't want our boys to go across, but we felt it was necessary because he was just sweeping everything he came to. And where was it? In one of the places they put
I don't remember
how it
was that we got in. I think it was with England somehow or another we got in on that side, but I do know when the Japs knocked the hell out of our Navy out there, then when Roosevelt came on.
Then we went.
And a lot of people say that he wanted to go to war for a long time, but he was afraid that the American people wouldn't back him. Until now, for example, when he had that do you remember when they did the Lend-Lease thing? Do you remember Lend-Lease?
Yeah.
How did you feel about that?
Well, wasn't that when Marshall had it? Marshall? That wasn't so prominent. It wasn't...
well, I'll tell you, Dick, now we have that Lend-Lease.
Do you know anybody that's...
I'm another one of these guys that just burns me up about this foreign aid.
You didn't like Lend-Lease going to Russia?
Foreign aid that all my life we have been the suckers. Our taxes have been gone to, now say, the Marshall Plan. Have you ever studied a Marshall Plan in your school, any place along the line?
A little bit.
That was to keep China from going communist.
So
we
that's
throw
really
billions of dollars over to China.
Would
Well,
you
what
like
did they
it?
do? They used our dough, and the China,
Because
communists used our
I'm
dough
trying
to
to
take
get
over
rid
the
of
country.
things now.
This is the second tape of Irene and Harold Goshert's oral history done on April 6th and 19th, 1986.
Germany or some of those others. Canada, they're sitting there, boy, they're sitting back there, they ain't doing a thing. They're over they are. But our taxpayers are feeding the world. That's another thing that gripes the heck out of me. I'll never forget me living down Louisville. We lived in a place that had 4 apartments. There was a woman there from England. She was English.
And she
on the
wasn't
ground floor. And Churchill come over one time from England.
Right.
And somebody says, well, I wonder what he's coming over here for. We'd already had give England millions of dollars to help them out of their slump.
Now, this is during World War II we helped them?
Yeah, and I suppose he's coming over to get us some more millions.
For the Queen.
So that Queen could sit on her fanny doing nothing.
She probably didn't abide by
At that time, I had read some of the Chicago Tribune that the Queen was getting $1 million a year salary. And that was 10 times as much as our president was getting at the time. And boy, that Dave would speak to me from that time on. Boy, was she man. Oh, I had no business talking about her Queen like that.
All right, now, Brett, is there anything, you're at the practically end here, is there anything else you want to say?
No, I was just, a lot of this stuff I was just asking for my own curiosity.
Then, of course, I didn't say that Clara had Tom. All right, now I'll start all over. Clara had Dick.
Dick, right.
Then she had Tom. Then I had Jack and Bill and Jim. And when I had Jim, my mother was in tears. She had 5 grandsons, no granddaughters.
Oh.
Now, when I was on the way, my dad said to her, if you have a boy, I'll buy you a piano. Well, I came, and she cried and cried, but she got her piano anyway.
Oh.
And I had to tell you this about car driving. This will interest you. We never had driver's license. I don't remember when they came in. I really don't remember. But my dad bought a Saxon 6. And we were the only ones in the family that had it. His fun on a Sunday was to take that thing apart and put it together again. Well, I was always a tomboy, so I was right at his side, and he'd explain what does this, when you put the clutch in, the flywheel does this, and I just knew, I knew the complete operation of the car. I was 13, and he owned 3 properties, one here, and one here, and he was Mr. Putz. They rented that house for 40-some years from him. But at that time, I was just 13, and she was just like an aunt to me. And we were standing there outside talking to my dad, and the car was on the side. There was no pavement. It was just all dirt. And I said, oh, I wish I could drive that car. And my dad, of course, I was always kind of his favorite. And my dad said, well, if you could get somebody to ride with you, you could drive it. And Mrs. Putz said, I'll ride with her. He looked at her, took the keys out of his pocket and threw them down. I never was under the wheel. I got under the wheel, I started the car, I turned it around, went all over, past my aunt and their grocery store where my cousins were, and I tooted the horn and waved, 13 years old. From that time on, I taught Clara how to drive the car. I taught many people how to drive the car, and I'm still driving. God only knows how long, but I'm still driving.
It was fun? You liked it a lot?
Well, at that time, of course, everybody, Irene drives the car. My mother depended on me completely, didn't she, honey? In the later years, when my dad was retired and had a very bad heart, and so did she, and that's where I contracted it. And I would take the kids to school, take my husband to Bendix, and then stop over every morning at my folks' house. And my dad would say, sometimes she had a bad night, and he'd say, she's sleeping. We'll just visit and just leave her alone. But most of the time, take Mom out. She's dying to go out. So I'd take her in the car, and we'd go and go. My house was never cleaned, it seemed like. I always was then I'd have to rush after him for lunch and then take her home, and then after the kids, and so that was my life. But I loved every bit of it.
Was it common to have women drive then, as much as you were? I mean, you were really mobile then.
Oh yes, yes, women drove. Yes, women drove.
It was common to have little kids, if they're 13 and 14, drive around.
Yes. How old were you, honey, when you drove?
15.
Ha 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 ha! I was 13.
Dad bought the car. And I'm like you. I'd seen him drive it a couple of times, and one day he wasn't around. I got in the car and I went someplace. I don't know where I went.
Was that telling your dad?
Come back, Dad. Come home to time. He says, "Mom, where's Harold?" And he says he took the car someplace, and he was up popping and blowing steam, and I drove in, and he come out, and he said, "Where you been?" I don't know where I went. I think I went over to, oh yeah, I know, I went over to her, had cousins over there, and they raised watermelons. And I went, I said, "Well, Dad, I got over for watermelon," and I'd go over there, and he'd give me a whole truck full for a dime. So I started unloading watermelons, and that was it from that time on. We'd go someplace, Dad, Mom get in the back seat, and I do the driving.
My mother always preferred me to drive rather than even my
Well, I
dad.
tell you something. There was no paved roads in those days.
No.
Just always dirt roads.
And there was no. I remember one time we were coming in that Saxon 6. We were out the country to my grandmother's, and we were coming, and a terrible storm blew up. Then you had to hurry up and pin the curtains up. And those curtains didn't come together, you know, and the wind would blow, and by the time we came home, we were drenched. It was horrible.
Oh, there wasn't no such thing as you'd have.
Oh, no. They were just curtains that
And then it was all stick shift, too. We didn't have no automatic.
Yeah.
Nothing
You
like
had to
that.
put your clutch in, take it out, shift, take it out slowly, then you put your clutch in again, shift to the second, take it out slowly. If you'd hurry, it'd go jerk, see? You have to know just how to do it, and shift into third, and let it out, then you were ready to go. But I never drove a Model T Ford. Gertrude always did.
Yeah.
I never did. They drove completely different.
I had a Model T Ford, and Dad went in the garage one day, and we had a what we call the guard bib, the usual back garage, and there was a drop-off back down here. Dad got in the darn thing, he went to put in the garage, he kept right on going through the back end, dropped off, brother. I couldn't get him in that car from that time on.
Now, Uncle Bill has a lot of film, and he has your dad's old movie thing, and that has Grandpa and Grandma Goshert's lot of their, you know, coming to our house and communion celebration and all kinds of film he has there. But Grandpa Goshert was a tall man, and Grandma was just up to his, not even to his shoulder, but she was a doll. She was just absolutely one of the greatest gals, and we just got along beautifully. And then Grandpa was very, very ill, and they had to give up living in Warsaw on the farm. It was only 20 acres. So we moved them to our place. And that was in September, and she went down and down. She had cancer of the lung and a very enlarged heart. And the doctor, Dr. Bryan, said, pray that her heart takes her instead of the lung cancer. And she got so bad, she'd be in bed. She wouldn't know. Grandpa sat at her bedside in a chair continually, all day long. He wouldn't leave. And she'd call me, she'd say, Nurse Irene, Nurse Irene. And I'd come and she'd say, that man over there, he just sitting there. She was just worried about, she didn't even know him, well, once in a great while she'd realize who he was. But she just was...
I come in one day and she asked Mom who I was.
No, you and Dad were standing at the foot of the bed talking. And she said, you too, yes, you too. And you said, Mom, what do you mean? And she said, you know what you did. And she started crying. And so I went to feed them because he was just there for lunch. And I went back and she was so tiny. She was just a little midget. And I put my arms around her and I said, what's the matter? And she said, they both tried to bury me alive. They tried to bury me alive. And I tried to talk her out of it. And she was just sobbing her little heart out. And Dad came and says, his dad came and said, what's the matter, Mom? And I said, Dad, she's had a bad thought. And I told him, he said, get over it. And he went back to, he was kind of on the gruff side. And he went back to the table. And I went and got a cold cloth and I wiped her face. And I sat there with her talking. And finally she fell asleep. But she had many, many bad, ideas.